Hello there, welcome back to the channel. This is Nerdled Empire, and today we are looking at the enigmatic, the mysterious, and the vicious species 8472, although perhaps not quite as vicious as we sometimes see them. Bear in mind, I want to say to people, this episode will stick to canonical sources only. What I mean by that is alpha canon, not beta, not delta, not gamma. So Star Trek Online, no. What we know about them from the Star Trek Online universe does not apply to the Prime universe. And that's where we're sitting for this. Before we get started, like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and check out the other videos in this playlist, which is a fairly extensive one, I think. Well over 100 episodes just generically about Star Trek so far. That's not including Mirror Universe ones, which, you know, a Mirror Universe matchup between 8472 and the Terrans might actually be kind of interesting. Maybe one day. So let's get to it. 8472 is not their true name. Their true name would probably be unpronounceable to humans. In fact, it's probably not pronounceable at all as 8472, although are capable of making some kind of noises. They don't seem to be great with linear communication in the same way humans are. Vocal communication has been noted by 8472 as being not coming naturally to them, so they probably don't have a pronounceable name anyway. How they refer to themselves is not exactly clear. Biologically speaking, this race originates in another dimensional plane, would be probably the best description. Another dimension, not another universe like, as I said, like the Terrans. That doesn't seem to be the case. It's a universe within the universe. Very complicated. 8472 themselves, as I say, biologically are a non-humanoid species, but do have the general profile and silhouette of basically a humanoid race. They tower over the average human, and in fact the average humanoid, at being about 7 feet tall. They have immensely dense genetic structures and an incredibly robust physique, with a biology that was resistant to Borg assimilation and pretty much resistant to everything else from our reality. They are tripedal by nature, if that's even a word, meaning they have 3 legs, they have 2 arms, and in some ways are vaguely reminiscent from the aliens of another universe which originated on Mars and attempted to invade Earth and were actually killed by disease, which is the complete opposite way to how this race could possibly be defeated. They are phenomenally powerful telepaths, far stronger than almost any other known species in the entire galaxy. Their home region of space is sometimes generically referred to as fluidic space. I am going to get to that in a moment and just state that whoever made up the term fluidic space, I mean truly gave it that classification and ran with it, is quite frankly someone that sits behind a desk somewhere on Earth at Starfleet headquarters or some other research facility and doesn't have any idea how the real universe works. Fluidic space, for reasons we'll get to, doesn't work if you think about it as the way it's described. Other theories about this race, noting that, is that they are evolved to swim through fluidic space. But again, this same idiot at head office on Earth doesn't know how the real universe works and is thinking a little bit too small, I feel, in this scenario. Fluidic space is a region of space, not a planet or an ocean upon which this race evolved. Unlike the Xindi aquatics and a few other species that actually evolved to live underwater, these races don't seem to do that, but their extremely hardy nature does lend itself to them being immune to the effects of the vacuum of space, at least for a time. It's also noted that biologically they are indistinguishable from their starships. It could be like a human growing a starship using their own blood as a template. 8472 are basically building their ships of their own genetic material. This actually could indicate that 8472 have augmented themselves with technology so that they're more like their ships, possibly. That's just a theory. It would make more sense than them starting off so physically highly evolved. The Borg would describe 8472 as the apex of biological evolution. Incredibly physically advanced, physically strong, physically resilient, and powerful telepaths, but completely incompatible with the Borg for assimilation purposes. I'm not going to dwell on their ships too much, as I will cover their vessels in a later subsequent video in and of themselves, but an 8472 bioship in general was smaller than your average Federation vessel. It was certainly warp capable, It was also capable of opening up vortexes or quantum singularities that allowed and permitted travel between dimensions, especially between our reality and theirs. Whether they could go elsewhere isn't entirely clear. This technology was originally developed by the Borg, but 8472 tech is vastly superior to that of the Borg, and they were easily able to replicate it and follow the Borg back, finding our entire region of space or universe completely alien and foreign to them, and thinking all creatures there were basically worthy of extermination. They decided that our galaxy shall be purged. This prompted the crew of the USS Voyager, a Federation starship lost in the Delta Quadrant, to do the unthinkable and forge an alliance with the Borg to actually defeat this enemy, rather than allow them to win. Even though that would have meant the destruction of the Borg and saved many other races, 116 for example, the greater threat was deemed to be 8472 at the time. Their ships, as I stated, were warp capable. Although we didn't often see them doing it, we know that one of their ships that got stranded here after an engagement with the Borg travelled at high warp and was able to travel many thousands of light years in a relatively short space of time, also indicating that their vessels were capable of transwarp velocity of some description. They would later, this vessel in particular, would run into the Hirogen, an extremely advanced and predatory species that lived in the Delta Quadrant and liked to hunt other sentient races. The Hirogen would track down, pursue, and injure this creature until they were able to overcome it and basically kill it and make it a trophy on their wall. At least that was their goal anyway. Again, it's a whole other story. Later, 8472 would infiltrate our reality once again, believing the Federation to be the true threat to their civilization. And actually, although they would learn that humans and the Federation in general had more in common with them than the Borg did, they kind of, because we worked with the Borg, kind of saw humanity as the real enemy. We were the ones who figured out how to defeat them. We were the ones that caused all that death, although they may not have considered blowing up planets filled with Borg to be genocide. It is. Drones are people too. We have to remember that. It's on that, actually, they were one of the few races to seem to their weapons were so advanced. A single shot from their weapons, by the way, pretty much overwhelmed Voyager in a single shot. An Intrepid class starship, state-of-the-art vessel, top of the line for its time, and it was easily overwhelmed by a single bioship without a problem, as was a single Borg cube. When a collection of these ships, 9 or 10 of them, possibly more, come together and combine those weapons, which they seem to be able to do, they were able to create a single energy discharge capable of destroying a planet that was presumably the same size as Earth. It is also presumable that if more ships worked together, they were able to destroy larger targets. Whether they could destroy things like gas giants or stars, a little unclear, but they're very advanced. Maybe they could find a way. Again, going back to their biology, their technology combined with their biology made them a formidable foe. Their tech, when they decided to re-infiltrate our reality, they altered their biology to appear human and like other Federation races. This is where they demonstrated an ability to actually communicate verbally. Although humanoid species prevalent in the Milky Way galaxy were so alien to them, for example, 8472 had 5 genders. Don't know how that works, but they have 5 genders. But the most races only have 2, maximum 3 genders in the Milky Way galaxy. They set up at least one space station within our reality where they did this experiment where they were trying to mimic humanity in the Federation and Starfleet to infiltrate it and destroy it from within rather than attacking it head on, not realizing that Voyager was stranded in the Delta Quadrant. How Voyager stumbled upon this thing? Little vague. I know they followed a signal. It seems like very contrived to me. I think the Federation and Voyager were extraordinarily lucky to find that outpost. And yeah, very, very lucky. If 8472's plan had been completed, the Federation may very well have been on its knees, especially once 8472 actually realized that Voyager was not able to communicate that weapons technology they'd had to their home world and use it against 8472 once again. 8472 were generally considered to be a hostile alien species, but this was from the point of view of antagonistic Federation officers that joined forces with their enemy. Now the Borg, we should state, started a conflict, and we all know how desperate an enemy will get when fighting the Borg. Look what engagements with the Borg did to Captain Jean-Luc Picard, an otherwise honourable, decent man. It made him a monster, or had the potential, if he wasn't pulled back from the brink, to have become one. And that's what they could do to him. Imagine what they could do to a race that was already kind of xenophobic, isolationist, As far as we know, according to the Borg and according to Kess and her communications with them, no other sentient race lived in fluidic space. It was just them. So they weren't really used to other races, but they clearly knew about them. And the fact that their vessels were armed and so powerful either indicates that 8472 themselves were not a unified people and were at each other's throats and had different clans or nations or whatever, or they had contact with other races, and perhaps the reason nothing else lived in fluidic space is because they had purged it of all other life. Quite frankly, we don't have the answers to these questions. However, 8472 was willing to negotiate with the Federation once it realized that humanity didn't really pose a threat to it like it believed. And now, for the bonus bit of this video, where we're going to discuss and break down fluidic space in and of itself.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Now, I've already discussed that perhaps fluidic space was devoid of life because 8472 had destroyed it. But we have to factor in several things. Now, look at 842 vessels. They're biological in nature. That's fine, that's not unusual. They're bringing used bioships. It's not unusual. It's just the way they went. We don't think, or it doesn't appear, that being biological in nature was necessary to operate there, as Voyager and Borg vessels seem perfectly capable of doing it. Calling it fluidic space is where I get stuck. Fluid has mass. Mass will have gravity. Gravity causes everything to collapse. Now, if fluidic space, and I've heard different theories on this as the reasons, as physics may not work the same there, but as warp seems to work there and other systems work there, I think we can assume that physics still works the same way in fluidic space as it does in normal space. So we start with that as a foundation. Gravity works the same way. Now, if 8472 evolved in fluidic space and were a space-dwelling species, why did they bother with starships with atmospheres? So it doesn't quite measure up. The fact that they could survive in environments like the vacuum of normal space and as well as in atmospheres aboard Borg vessels and Federation ships doesn't compute with them being a species that are aquatically evolved. Fluidic space, to me, I believe is probably, and this is only a theory, a hypothesis if you will rather, that 8472's home dimension was more like that of the sphere builders. It was not fluid in the traditional sense of the word. It was merely a way to describe it in a way that humans could comprehend what it was. It was probably energy or protomatter in some way that was immune to the gravitational effects of growth. We do see when ships move through it, they do seem to leave a trail behind them, but then again, moving through a gas cloud, a nebula, or through the distortions and the energy thermobaric clouds of the Delphic expanse had a similar effect. So if we think about fluidic space as being more like the home territory of the sphere builders, it starts to make a little bit more sense. Then you can start thinking, well, there might be stars. Maybe the stars won't work exactly the same, but they might have them. There might be planets. And maybe I can't even begin to understand how the energies and materials of fluidic space interact with a strong gravitational force like a planet or a star or a black hole or whatever else might be there. Maybe they're constructed of the same material and they're constantly feeding off each other. There'd have to be some kind of symbiotic relationship. It's also entirely plausible that fluidic space is more like visible dark matter. It's not so much that it's a solid, or it's a fluid rather, it's got matter, it's got mass, but it's got some kind of texture to it on some level, but is more energy based and therefore is not subject to collapse like a thing, or it's in a constant state of collapse but is so big it's not got there yet. That is also a distinct possibility. There are many different ways it can be interpreted, and if you have any, please put them in the comments below and let's have a discussion about what the fuck fluidic space is, because it really doesn't make any sense that bioships would operate in both realms perfectly well, and so would Voyager. And although we didn't see Voyager or Borg vessel go to warp in that region of space, I think that it probably could, because there's no indication that their subspace based systems went offline, like transporters, the deflector dish, the warp engines, communications. They didn't seem to go down. So if subspace exists, warp probably exists. If the area of space had mass, it'd be like being at the bottom of a giant ocean. No matter how good your shields were, you're at an ocean the size of a galaxy at least. You're being crushed like a bug. It's not going to be plausible for this thing to have mass. Otherwise, everything there would crush. Now, I'm no physicist, so I could be wrong, but something tells me, I don't think I'm far off the mark. Whatever fluidic space was composed of, it was probably not a fluid like water or liquid nitrogen or something like that, or mercury or some other liquefied material. It must have been more ethereal, more energy than matter, because otherwise it would have collapsed. It would have been attracted to itself and collapsed in. So that's where I get stuck on fluidic space and how they could have evolved to swim through it. Maybe they did evolve to swim in their natural environment, but again, if they were aquatic in nature, why weren't inside their ships filled with fluid? Do you see the problem? If they needed fluidic space to survive, or why wasn't the inside of their ships filled with fluidic space? There's a number of questions that come up when talking about fluidic space. Was fluidic space really as big as we think? Also, that being there, it could have been an optical illusion created by the sensors to give it texture, but there seemed to be an innate glow. What was causing that energy? Where was that light coming from? Stars, perhaps? Or some other energy producing material within fluidic space, some other objects? Something about the space coalescing, releasing energy. Because without energy, no life is going to exist. I don't care how highly evolved it's supposed to be. So 8472 have a lot of characteristics and questions about them which are hard to understand. Why they're such powerful telepaths? That's just high evolution, or maybe some form of genetic engineering. Why they've got 5 genders? That's hard to explain and understand, and really hard to see functionally working. But they are an extremely evolved and technologically advanced race, which I doubt evolved in such a vacuum culturally as we are led to believe. Now, if you have any different theories on them, let me know in the comments below. And that is 8472. I just want to take this moment to thank you for watching that video. If you liked what you saw, please check out my social links in the description box below to Instagram and Twitter and others, and also is down there a link to my Patreon page where you can support this channel and the others as I try to grow this franchise and do this more regularly. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and bye bye.